Hello and good evening. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Here are the top stories for tonight. US to exempt tariffs on Indonesian palm oil and cocoa. And Trump moves to fire Fed Governor Cook. All that and more coming up on AWANI International. The United States has agreed in principle to exempt Indonesian exports of cocoa, palm oil and rubber from a 19% tariff imposed earlier this month. Indonesia's chief tariff negotiator, Airlangga Hartarto, says the exemption will take effect once both sides finalize the deal, though no timeline has been set.
Hartarto said talks also covered potential US investment in fuel storage projects in Indonesia in partnership with its sovereign wealth fund Danantara and state energy firm Pertamina. He noted the tariff exemption applies to products not produced in the US, including palm oil, cocoa and rubber, with duties set to be zero or close to zero once the deal is finalized. Indonesia was among the first to strike a tariff deal with the US in July, but Jakarta still faced the same 19% rate as Thailand and Malaysia, just below Vietnam's 20%. During the latest talks, Indonesia offered billions in US investment and purchases of American crude, liquefied petroleum gas, planes and farm products.
Now in the US, Donald Trump has moved to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook in the latest escalation of the US president's attacks on the central bank. Trump accuses Cook of falsifying mortgage application documents and says he has sufficient reason and constitutional powers to remove her. Cook has pushed back, saying Trump has no authority to fire her and that she will not resign.
The announcement came late Monday on Trump's social media account, where he posted a letter saying Cook was out effective immediately, claiming she had obtained a mortgage on a second home she incorrectly described as her primary residence. The allegation first came from a Trump ally. Cook, appointed by Joe Biden in 2022, is the first black woman on the Fed's Board of Governors. She also sits on the committee that sets U.S. interest rates. The move against Cook follows months of attacks on the central bank's chair, Jay Powell. Trump has sharply criticized Powell over the pace of interest rate cuts, calling him a stubborn mule. An attempt to remove Cook could trigger a legal showdown and raise questions about the independence of one of the world's most powerful central banks.
We'll have more after the break. Stay tuned.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Australia has taken the unprecedented step of expelling Iran's ambassador, accusing Tehran of orchestrating two anti-Semitic arson attacks last year. Ahmad Sadeghi and 3 other Iranian officials will have 7 days to leave the country. It marks the first time Australia has expelled an ambassador since World War II.
ASIO has now gathered enough credible intelligence to reach a deeply disturbing conclusion that the Iranian government directed at least 2 of these attacks. Iran has sought to disguise its involvement, but ASIO assesses it was behind the attacks on the Lewis Continental Kitchen in Sydney on October 20 last year and the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne on December 6 last year.
The Australian government will also designate Tehran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organisation. Foreign Minister Penny Wong said Australia would continue to maintain some diplomatic lines with Tehran, but had suspended operation at its embassy in Iran for the safety of staff.
The United States and South Korea are moving toward a non-binding agreement to to define how $350 billion in investment funds from a trade deal will operate. Seoul agreed last month to cut US tariffs in exchange for pledging the investments, though differences emerged over how profits and other details would be handled.
Speaking in Washington during the summit between President Donald Trump and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, Presidential Advisor Kim Yong-bom said both sides were making progress on broad terms. Kim added that the U.S. hopes to formalize a memorandum of understanding to oversee the investment plan as soon as possible. South Korean businesses are expected to support strategic industries including batteries, chips, pharmaceuticals, and artificial intelligence. He noted that equity investments would be limited, with most funds distributed through loans and guarantees. The deal comes amid earlier disputes over profit sharing after U.S. suggested they would take 90% of returns.
Germany will not join Western allies in recognizing Palestine at next month's United Nations General Assembly. Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Berlin will not join as the prerequisites for recognizing Palestine remain unmet.
He said this at a joint news conference with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Merz also reiterated that the federal government's position on recognizing Palestine remained unchanged, and Canada was already aware of this stance. Last month, Carney said that Canada planned to recognize Palestine at the General Assembly, following similar announcement from France and Britain.
Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem has rejected mounting pressure to disarm. Speaking from Beirut on Monday, Naim Qassem says the Lebanese government must first ensure Israel honors a November 2024 ceasefire before any talks on a national defense strategy.
He dismissed proposals to integrate Hezbollah's arsenal into state control, insisting Israel must withdraw from Lebanese territory, release prisoners and halt attacks. Last month, Lebanon's Council of Ministers approved a resolution directing the army to plan Hezbollah's disarmament by the end of the year. It is part of a US-backed initiative tied to Israel ending its occupation and daily attacks. Hezbollah, however, has vowed to treat the decision as if it doesn't exist.
United States President Donald Trump says that he spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin after meeting Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders in Washington last week. He describes his conversations with Putin as positive, but admits he gets frustrated when attacks still follow in Kyiv or elsewhere.
The last known call between Trump and Putin was on August 18th. That's when Trump briefly stepped out of White House talks with Zelensky and European officials to call the Russian president. And over the State Department, Secretary of State Marco Rubio joined a call on Monday with Ukraine's foreign minister and his counterparts from Britain, France, Finland, Germany, Italy, Poland and the European Union, where they all agreed to keep pushing together on diplomatic efforts toward a lasting settlement.
United States President Donald Trump says he wants to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un this year. He made the remark in the Oval Office while hosting South Korea's new president Lee Jae-myung.
North Korea did not respond immediately, but later its state media claimed recent US-South Korea military drills showed Washington intended to occupy the peninsula and threaten neighboring countries. Since Trump took office in January, Kim has ignored repeated US calls to resume direct diplomacy. Lee, meanwhile, warned that sanctions have failed to curb North Korea's nuclear development. He said Pyongyang could soon produce 10 to 20 nuclear warheads a year and only needs a perfected re-entry vehicle to deliver them intercontinentally.
United States President Donald Trump suggests that many Americans might prefer a dictator as he continues his clampdown on Washington and enforces stricter measures against flag burning. Speaking at the Oval Office, Trump also criticized the media and his political opponents, saying his National Guard-backed crackdown on crime and immigration is underappreciated.
And they don't acknowledge it. And they say, we don't need him, freedom, freedom, he's a dictator, he's a dictator. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense, and I'm a smart person. And when I see what's happening to our cities, and then you send in troops, instead of being praised, they're saying you're trying to take over the republic. These people are sick.
Trump deployed the National Guard to Washington to address what he described as rampant crime and assumed federal control of the city's police department.
As global trade faces increasing fragmentation, regional cooperation has become more critical than ever. Our correspondent Farhana Sheikh reports from the Kuala Lumpur Roundtable on Asia-Pacific Regional Cooperation, where leaders and experts are charting the future of Asia-Pacific integration.
I'm here at the Kuala Lumpur Roundtable on Asia-Pacific Regional Cooperation, where thought leaders, policymakers and experts gather to discuss some of the world's most pressing issues. Among them are shifting global dynamics and trade challenges. Now, I caught up with Tan Sri Dato Dr. Rebecca Fatima, former Executive Director of the APEC Secretariat, to discuss building resilience and a strong business community in response to the evolving trade and cooperation landscape. Have a listen.
What's happening in the world and in this environment is something that we have not experienced in the past. This sort of trade tensions that's taken the form of such intense negotiations around uncertainties. You're negotiating around uncertainties. You're not sure what's going to come out of the negotiations, even after you leave the negotiating room. So it's a skill that requires us and a mindset to think of making sure we're adaptable, we're flexible, we're agile in dealing with this level of uncertainty. And I think what we'll see happening more is that this level of uncertainty will just continue. So for me, it's very important for governments to engage with the business. At the end of the day, it's about the business in each of our economies. So working very closely with the businesses to appreciate, to understand how we then can support business. I think that is the sort of questions, the sort of kind of questioning and thinking that negotiators should go into the discussions with the US in any trade negotiation for that matter. How will this impact business? What do we need to do to ensure that we mitigate some of the impact? You cannot do away with the impact. There will be impact. So how do you work with the business community to ensure that you stand as government supporting and helping the businesses go through this very difficult and challenging time?
Rebecca also highlighted the need for capacity building and inclusivity, ensuring smaller economies and MCMEs get the support needed to fully participate in international trade and the formal economy.
The capacity building aspect of APEC it's one of the most important pillars in APEC, because that's where we ensure that the smaller economies are not left out, that they are provided the necessary technical assistance and capacity building so that they can participate more fully in these international negotiations, international bodies. Also, we have a stream of work which focuses on building capacity of small and medium enterprises. So this is another aspect of making sure we're inclusive in the work that we do. And last year, we did a lot of work on ensuring that we move folks who are in the informal economy to the formal economy. Now, because if you look at our spread of MSMEs, especially in the smaller and more developing economies, a lot of their businesses tend to be in the informal sector. In one case, up to 80%, of the businesses are in the informal sector. How do you bring them into the formal sector? What do you need to do? And that's the work that we did last year.
That report wraps up AWANI International tonight. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies and the shifts behind the power fairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more. Be sure to follow our social media accounts as well. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Thank you for watching. Good night.